It all started with a gnome. Not a noisy gnome, not a lewd gnome, but a cheerful, chubby little ceramic fellow in a blue pointy hat, holding a fishing rod. His name was Barnaby, and my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, had picked him out at the garden center. We placed him by the small pond in our front yard, and she was delighted. He was, in her words, keeping the goldfish company. I should have known that in the sanctimonious, beige-bricked paradise of Serenity Estates, joy is a conditional privilege. The first notice arrived 3 days later. It was in a crisp, white envelope, bearing the official seal of the Serenity Estates Homeowners Association. It felt like a subpoena from the Ministry of Petty Grievances. Notice of violation. Case #SE-4832. Dear homeowner, it has come to the attention of the Architectural Review Committee that you have installed an unapproved, non-conforming lawn ornament, hereafter referred to as the gnome, on your property, specifically in the pond-adjacent flowerbed zone. This is in direct violation of Serenity Estates Covenant 12, Section C, Subsection 4. No statuary, gnomes, flamingos, or other figurative lawn art shall be displayed without prior written approval from the Arch. Approved items must be of a tasteful, classical nature, e.g., Greco-Roman busts, tasteful cherubs. You have 48 hours to remove the gnome. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $50 per day until the violation is remedied. Sincerely, the Serenity Estates HOA Board. Karen P. Mitchell, President. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. A gnome. They were fining me for a gnome. I showed it to my wife, Sarah. She sighed, that particular sigh reserved for dealing with idiots. Just take a picture of it and submit it for approval, Mike. It's not worth the fight. But something in me, some long-dormant spark of rebellion against pointless authority, flickered. It wasn't about the $50. It was about the principle. It was about my daughter's happiness. It was about the sheer, unadulterated audacity of a group of people who thought they could legislate against whimsy. So, I didn't remove Barnaby. Instead, I took a high-resolution photo of him, wrote a very formal, very sarcastic application for his retroactive approval, and mailed it to the HOA. I cited his classical, folkloric roots, and his proven ability to deter Piscine delinquency. This, my friends, was my opening salvo in the Great Serenity Estates Gnome War. My application was denied. The response letter, also from Karen, was a masterpiece of bureaucratic condescension. While the board appreciates your attempt at compliance, the submitted gnome does not meet the standards of tasteful or classical as defined in our community ethos. Its garish colors and comical expression are deemed disruptive to the community's curated aesthetic. The fine began accruing, $50 a day, for a 10-inch tall piece of pottery. Then the phone calls started. Not from Karen, oh no, that would be too direct. They came from her minions. Brenda from 3 doors down called to gently remind me that we were all trying to maintain property values. Chad, her husband, stopped by while I was mowing the lawn to ask, with faux concern, if I was having some financial troubles that were preventing me from paying the fine. I remained calm. I was a granite cliff against their petty waves. I paid the fines, meticulously documenting every check and transaction. I started a folder. The Serenity Files. It was beginning to bulge. The conflict escalated when I decided to test the boundaries. If Barnaby was a violation, what about the rest of the neighborhood? I took an evening walk with my dog, a folder in my hand, and I documented everything. I found Brenda had a welcome mat that was 2 inches too wide. Chad had a basketball hoop whose net was faded and unsightly. And Karen Mitchell herself? Her garbage cans were permanently stationed at the curb. A clear violation of the cans may only be visible on collection day and must be stored out of sight thereafter rule. I didn't report them. Not yet. I was gathering intelligence. The fines kept coming. We were now over $1,000 in. Sarah was getting anxious. Mike, this is getting ridiculous. Just put the gnome in the backyard. It's not about the gnome anymore, honey, I'd say, poring over the massive, soul-crushing tome that was the Serenity Estates Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, CC and RS. It's about the ecosystem of control. I spent my nights buried in legalese. I learned about aesthetic uniformity, nuisance clauses, and architectural integrity. It was dry, tedious work. But then I struck gold. Or rather, I struck hypocrisy. While cross-referencing the rules about visible structures, I found a gem. Covenant 7, Section A. No permanent external structures may be erected without ARC approval, including, but not limited to, sheds, gazebos, and greenhouses. Karen Mitchell had a beautiful, sprawling, professionally installed greenhouse in her backyard. It was visible from the street if you stood at just the right angle near her side gate. I had a photo of it from my documentation walk. It was most certainly a permanent structure, and I had a sinking suspicion she'd never sought, nor granted herself, approval for it. The spark of rebellion became a flame. I decided to go nuclear, but quietly. I filed a formal, anonymous complaint against President Mitchell's unapproved greenhouse. I cited the specific bylaw, attached the photo, and dropped it in the HOA suggestion box. The response was not a notice of violation. It was a declaration of war. 2 days later, a new notice arrived. This one was for our mailbox. It was a standard, black, colonial-style mailbox, exactly like everyone else's. The notice claimed it had a dent on the side that created a visually discordant element. Fine, $25. The next day, another notice. Our lawn was an unacceptable shade of green, suggesting the use of non-approved fertilizers. Fine, $75. They were fabricating violations. They had figured out my anonymous complaint and were punishing me for it. The neighborhood tension was palpable. Brenda and Chad would cross the street to avoid me. I was now the problem homeowner, the rebel, the one threatening the very fabric of their beige existence. But I wasn't alone. I started getting emails from a few other neighbors. A young couple, the Garcias, who had been fined for a too colorful children's playset. An elderly man, Mr. Henderson, who was cited for having his American flag up outside of designated patriotic holidays. A small, silent resistance was forming. I knew a direct assault wouldn't work. Karen controlled the board, the process, everything. I needed a bigger weapon. So I dug deeper into my research. I needed to understand the structure of the HOA itself, not just its rules. I filed a request to see the HOA's financial records and meeting minutes, a right afforded to all homeowners. Getting them was like pulling teeth, but I finally received a thick stack of photocopied papers. And there it was, the smoking gun, the thermonuclear warhead. In the financials, I found repeated payments to a company called Mitchell Landscaping and Design for community beautification projects. Thousands of dollars. Mitchell. Karen's husband's name was Greg Mitchell. This wasn't just a violation. This was embezzlement. She was funneling HOA funds directly into her own family's business without, I was willing to bet, any proper bidding process or board approval beyond her own. I had her, not just on a petty bylaw, but on a serious, potentially criminal breach of fiduciary duty. The annual HOA meeting was the following week. It was held in the community clubhouse. The air was thick with cheap coffee and simmering resentment. Karen sat at the head of a long table, gavel in hand, a smug smile plastered on her face. Brenda and Chad flanked her like loyal attack dogs. The meeting droned on through budget approvals and committee reports. Then, Karen opened the floor for homeowner concerns. "Any new business?" she asked, already looking bored. I stood up. I was calm. I was prepared. I had my Serenity Files folder under my arm. Karen. Mike Johnson from 1428. I have a few concerns. She sighed theatrically. "Mr. Johnson, if this is about your gnome, it's about a lot of things," I said, my voice even. "It's about due process. It's about fairness. And it's about the fact that you, as HOA president, are the biggest rule breaker in Serenity Estates." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. "How dare you?" she sputtered, her face turning a satisfying shade of crimson. "I have the proof right here," I said, holding up my folder. I walked through my evidence, calmly and methodically, like I was presenting a business case, which, in a way, I was. First, the selective enforcement. I showed photos of Brenda's mat, Chad's hoop, and 3 other violations from board members' homes, all unreported. Olumfind. Murmurs spread through the room. Second, your own violations, Karen. I projected a picture of her greenhouse onto the wall. Covenant 7, Section A. No permanent structure without approval. Did you approve this for yourself? She was speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. And finally, I said, my voice dropping, the most serious matter, the payments from the HOA operating fund to Mitchell Landscaping and Design, a company owned by your husband. Over $15,000 in the last year alone. Was this contract put out to bid? Was it approved by a disinterested board? Or are you just writing checks to yourself? The room erupted. It was chaos. People were shouting. The Garcias were on their feet, yelling about their playset. Mr. Henderson was waving his cane. Karen was screaming, "This is slander. I'll sue you. I'm calling the police." And she did. In her hysterical rage, she actually dialed 911 and told them a homeowner was causing a disturbance and making false accusations. When the 2 police officers arrived, the meeting was in an uproar. Karen rushed over to them, pointing a trembling finger at me. "That's him. That's the one. He's trespassing and harassing me." The lead officer, a seasoned-looking sergeant, looked at the chaotic scene, then at me standing calmly by my chair. He walked over. "Sir, can you tell me what's going on?" I smiled. "Of course, officer. My name is Michael Johnson. I'm a homeowner here. We were having a civil discussion at our annual HOA meeting, and I was presenting evidence that the HOA president, Ms. Mitchell, has been violating several community bylaws and may be involved in the misappropriation of association funds." I handed him my folder. "It's all documented here. The financial records are a matter of public record for the HOA." The sergeant glanced through the papers, then looked at Karen, who was now pale and shaking. He handed the folder back to me. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "this appears to be a civil matter. We don't handle HOA disputes." "But he's," she stammered, utterly defeated. It was then that I delivered the final blow. I looked at the entire room, at my newly emboldened neighbors. "Oh, and one more thing, Karen," I said, my voice clear and carrying. "You've been so busy trying to run this little HOA that you forgot to ask what I do for a living." I let the silence hang for a moment. "I'm a corporate consultant. My firm's biggest client? The National Association of Homeowners Associations. I don't just know the Serenity Estates CC and RS. I helped write the model bylaws that over 60% of the HOAs in this country are based on. I literally wrote the book on this. And you," I said, turning my gaze back to her, "are a textbook case of everything we advise boards not to be." The fallout was immediate and beautiful. Karen P. Mitchell was voted out as president before the meeting even officially adjourned. An emergency audit was launched. The $15,000 was repaid by the Mitchells, and Greg's company was permanently barred from HOA contracts. A new board was elected. I was nominated, but I politely declined. My work was done. The first order of business for the new board? They repealed the tasteful statuary rule. Now, Barnaby the gnome stands proudly by our pond, joined by a pink flamingo, a smiling solar-powered turtle, and a small, tasteful cherub, the Garcias contribution. Our lawn is a vibrant, possibly unapproved, shade of green. Our property values, contrary to Karen's predictions, have actually gone up. And every time I see Karen Mitchell speedwalk past my house, refusing to make eye contact, I give Barnaby's pointy hat a cheerful little tap. He's not just keeping the goldfish company anymore. He's a monument to the fact that no matter how powerful someone seems, you can fight City Hall. Or in this case, you can fight the HOA. You just have to be calmer, smarter, and have better paperwork than they do.